All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jalen, and also welcome to episode 3 of Reading the Room, a podcast in which I talk with a guest about something bookish generally. And today's guest is someone who I followed for quite a while before I even started booktubing. It's Matthew Sciarappa. You all likely know him, I'm pretty sure. He's also a bookstagrammer. He works in publishing. I have many questions for him today. So yeah, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself as well, Matthew.
Sure. Hello, my name's Matthew Sciarappa. I've been doing the booktube thing since 2018. I started doing booktube when I was a bookseller, and then I moved to publishing. Still have been doing it. Only started bookstagramming recently, so you can find me on all platforms. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you, Jalen.
Of course. I have to ask you, since you bring up bookstagramming, I know I've mentioned this in your DMs before, but your pictures are like next level. I don't even understand how you did some of them. And so like, for example, let me pull one up. This one last stop picture, like how? What is your process?
There's this lovely little website called photopia.com, and it serves all of the functions of Photoshop without paying for Photoshop. So it's a combination of like actual me taking a photo and then doing some editing. So if it's just like I already have a blanket with a lovely texture, or there's a nice wall somewhere, I'll just take a photo and post that after a little bit of editing. For a photo like that, I took a photo of that book on a piece of paper that was colored, but then all of the circles were added post. So it's just a matter of light editing. And I bought a big thing of cardstock from Amazon a while ago, and I have made full use of it for about 3 years now.
Nice. I mean, so I know you work in marketing at Penguin Random House. And so does that job kind of inform how you approach bookstagramming too? Or like, how does that balance kind of play out?
I mean, what I do because I do social media as part of my job, and that comes with a lot of book photography. And I would say like the types of photos I take for work are so different from what I take personally. Like I'm very much a fan of just a straight on book shot, because my bookstagram is just single reviews. That's primarily what I do. And also, no matter what circumstances I'm in, no matter what my supplies are or what my accessibility is, I can always take that kind of photo. Whereas I know a lot of people like have like specific, benches that they need to visit, or, coffee shops that they need to take all their photos in. And while I totally admire that and am slightly envious of it, I just know that like I want to be able to do the same thing and keep a certain amount of consistency. So that's why I have my style the way that it is on my personal platform. But obviously for what I do for work, it's a lot of, I think, more traditional bookstagramming. It's a lot of book stacks. It's a lot of angled shots in different parts of the book, different locations, try to make it a little bit more, we refer to it as lifestyle photography, as opposed to like a flat lay or anything else.
Gotcha. Yeah, and kind of going more into that, I'm curious. I asked Hunter this in my last episode, but I'm wondering how like recently with the change on Instagram to like Reels being prioritized and TikTok kind of being like the moment of social media, has that been, I don't know, in discussion with like your work going forward, or like book promoting, or how is that going to look, or what do you predict for that?
It's so tough. Personally, it's not going to change anything that I do, just because I'm not going to be filming videos. That's not what I seek out of my social media experience. So it's a bummer that less people will be able to engage with me because Instagram will not show them me, but I've just kind of like accepted that as part of the gig. For work, it's incredibly tough, right? Because I always think that in general, publishing's behind. It takes publishing several years to catch up to trends, just because publishing tends to be a slow industry. I think with the pivot to video, it's a matter of allocating resources and time. And, it's something that we obviously want to do, but also like, if I'm the one who's running the Instagram for an imprint, like, am I the face of that imprint? Like, should it be me who's behind the camera or talking to you about books? Like, do I fit? And that might not be the case. So it's kind of difficult, because I feel like the drive to video is informed by a drive towards personality and a drive towards authenticity and intimacy. And with just a stagnant photo, you can get away with not having that. You can have like some fun copy, in your caption, but it can just be a book stack, and that works. But video is just a whole different beast. And if you don't have like an author who's interested, or somebody who can actually do it as part of their job, it's just not going to happen. And I know that a lot of imprints have really pivoted like very quickly towards video in light of the update, and it's been very successful for them. I think a lot of their success is due to having authors who are willing to be behind the camera, but a lot of the authors that I work with aren't even on social media or don't feel comfortable with that, and I think that's perfectly fine. They're not employed by us to be social media stars, they're employed by us to write books, you know?
Right.
So it's very tricky, and it's a constant conversation. Like joining TikTok, the types of content, the brand of the content, the style, tone, emoji usage, these are things that are part of my everyday.
Yeah. And so how much is, so I guess to preface this before going into more about your work in publishing, I'll ask you some questions. I don't know how much you can tell me. I don't know how much is secret, but I just have some general questions that I know like there's a lot of discussion on Bookstagram. I've seen, especially lately, about like Galleys and the process behind how publishers choose who they send Galleys to or what that actually looks like how expensive they are. So yeah, I don't know if you have any insight into that or what you can tell me about from your experience, what your involvement is with that process.
Totally. So I will preface everything by saying like my what I say here does not reflect that of my employer. I'm not like here as a representative of my employer. I'm here as like your friend slash a person who's on the internet. And I'm not going to say anything that would get me fired. Not that I think that any question you ask and that I answer could, but like, you know, take it with a grain of salt. Be a smart consumer, you know, judge my answers accordingly. Galleys are very interesting, especially in a post-COVID world. Well, granted, we are still in, but you know what I mean. In a post-impact initially of COVID world, where at least at the company where I work, we have stopped making galleys for a lot of books, and certain books just won't get them. And any like influencer outreach or general push, even publicity push, that involves sending a copy of the book will either be digital or with a finished copy now. What gets galleys is a discussion that I'm not even really a part of as a marketer. Like that's kind of chosen separately based on what the publisher is interested in pushing and given to us to like work with. So that's one thing, is like galleys just aren't happening as much for as many titles. It used to be like a big industry standard. Every book gets a certain amount of galleys printed. And I think, you know, once budgets were cut, once distribution was hindered by COVID, now, especially with all like the weird stuff that's going on with paper and the production of books, like I feel like it's going to change again. Who knows? I feel like you can't like go on Twitter without seeing an article about production costs and all the delays. I think it's interesting to see like what resources you have available to use. I will also say that like not every imprint or publisher uses galleys the same way. So the way that my team and my company uses galleys is going to be entirely different from the next. And galleys can be used in a ton of different ways. What I think influencers often forget is that galleys for influencer use in the long haul is still a very new thing. And that galleys originally were for reviewers, for like the Times, or like people who like get paid to review. They were for, you know, blurbing so that, you know, somebody could read the book and provide a blurb for the finished copy. You know, there were other uses for galleys other than, hey, I have a galley. They were for booksellers, especially to you know, get people who were actually physically hand selling books excited about it. So there is an exclusivity element, but in terms of like pushing it to the internet, that's still kind of like a fairly new thing for the industry. And again, publishing moves super slowly. How I use galleys, this is a very long answer.
No, I love this.
How I use galleys is, you know, it depends on how many I have or how many I have been allocated to be able to use. Keeping in mind that sales gets a certain amount of galleys, publicity will get a certain amount of galleys, the academic marketing teams will get a certain amount of galleys, library marketing teams will get galleys. Like I'm not the only one who gets them. Marketing is not the only, you know, group that has them. Editors get them, like everyone gets galleys and we all use them in different ways. How I do it, depending on the amount, if I have like a good amount, whatever that number may be, I will seek out firstly and foremostly influencers who are celebrities. Like I will seek out the people who, you know, like the Sarah Jessica Parkers of the world, who will like be able to sell copies with just one post.
Mm-hmm.
And like that is a guarantee, you know, and I'll seek out those people. You know, if I'm publishing a book or if I'm working on a book about history, I will seek out like professors who have like large influential followings, or I'll seek out, you know, organizations and the leaders of those organizations and send books to them. Like that's kind of usually where my brain first goes, because those are guaranteed in terms of like, if this person does post, success will ensue. Then obviously I do set aside for bookstagrammers, because one, I feel a certain amount of loyalty to bookstagrammers and booktubers because I am one. Like, publishers send me books, so like I know the thrill and joy of that. I also believe in the power of the hand sell and like the individual sell. Like, I feel like you could track the copies of Vita Nostra that I have sold in my lifetime from my content.
Mine's right there because of you.
There's one.
Yeah.
You know, so like I stand by it and I really believe in it. But Bookstagram is also just a lot trickier because there are far more of you. There's far more of us. And it's a matter of, you know, who I seek out people who are generally reviewers, who are generally going to put some thought behind the book and be able to approach it in a way that makes other people engage with it. That's, you know, optimistically, like in an optimistic scenario, that is what I would be seeking out. I would be seeking out people who either already love the author and want to geek out about the author, who take gorgeous photos and have like a passion for like actually engaging with text. I try to find people who I know will connect with said book. And then the rest, you know, would go to, you know, people who are already associated with working with the imprint, people that like are recommended to me. You know, it could be ad hoc, like somebody just sends a really charming DM and I think that they would really enjoy the book, so I'll send it to them. You know, eventually all of those specific targeting gives way to the work, and I need to get more things done in my job. Galleys are a tiny portion of everything that I do, so like it's not something that I can dedicate immense amounts of time researching who I can give books to. And so the specificity of the distribution of Galleys is often dependent on the time crunch that I am facing, other priorities that might happen, etc. That was a long and babbling answer. If you have any questions based on anything I just said.
That's what I was hoping for. I want all the juicy details about it, because I think joining Bookstagram, I was a little bit, of course, it's exciting getting Galleys. I often seek them out. I love the new and upcoming releases. I always try to like review newer titles naturally. My initial assumption was maybe it was just like, if you don't hit a threshold in followers or something, like if you don't have 5K on Bookstagram, then you're not considered. But that's not the case, I've found. And so it's cool to hear like your perspective of what, like, I want it to be, I don't want people to lose hope if they're like a younger, like a smaller account that is just starting out, in terms of if that's their goal. I think it is still possible, because it was for me, at least, in terms of getting some. I mean, it's tough with the bigger titles and what have you, but
you know, sometimes it just comes down to chance, like finding somebody on a good day, and it can be as simple as that. It's unfortunate, but like that's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Right.
It could be like knowing somebody. I used to get Galleys because I was a bookseller, and I, you know, perhaps not like appropriate to FTC guidelines, I would not necessarily disclose that the reason why I got a Galley was because I was a bookseller at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just post about it, and people would think like, oh, this person gets Galleys, which I am openly saying that wasn't a great thing for me to have been doing at the time. But, you know, there are so many different ways to get them. You know, you could know an editor, you could be at a school and there's an event happening and they want to reach out to students. You know, sometimes it will be the case that like, yes, following does really matter, because ultimately our job is to market books, therefore get the most amount of eyes on them. And furthermore, our job is to sell books. Marketing is a service to publishers. We need to try to make money. And, you know, we know that if we can send to a person with a large following, that is a chance for more people to be able to see the book and therefore perhaps want it. So again, it kind of like exclusivity is a thing, you know, and I know that some publishers focus on it a lot more than others. When you see publishers doing like special galley printings, or like there are 3 different galleys for this book, like that is fully their intention, is to make you jealous, make you want it, and make you so excited about it that all you do is talk about it, especially to your non-bookish friends who only read like 3 books a year. That's going to be the book that they want suddenly because you can't shut up about it. Like, there is a certain strategy in that. I don't play that game. I don't think my team plays that game. It's just, it becomes very tricky, especially when it comes to having limited galleys. If you only get like 10 printed for marketing, you know, you can do some giveaways, you can do, you know, small things that get people excited because there is an exclusive element to it. Or back in the days of conventions, may they rest in peace, you know, having a table with like 30 galleys set up and it's first come, first served, like that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not the only thing, but it is. But yeah, no, if you're a small channel, long-winded answer to say is if you are a small channel or have a small number of subscribers, I'm still looking at you, at least personally as a marketer. Like because I come from that, and even my numbers are still significantly small than most, you know, popular bookstagrammers and booktubers. You know, I look to people who will authentically, I look for diehards. I look for people who like are going to love a book so much they want to push it into people's hands. And oftentimes those are people with smaller followings. And that's just kind of, you know, it's a nice little connection that you can make.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, so related to your work also, you're also part of the, I forget the name, the Penguin Random House influencer team.
I'm an employee ambassador.
Okay, right. So you're in this cool space of where you're working for Penguin Random House, but you're a book reviewer yourself, you're an influencer. And so how does that program kind of facilitate your reviews? And do you ever feel nervous about maybe if you didn't like a certain title that your company publishes, like how do you approach that, or what are you allowed to say about it?
So the employee ambassador program is really, really cool. And it's like such a perk of working for PRH where you apply for it. I was specifically like recommended for it by one of my teammates. They thought that I would have fun and they said yes. You get a selection of books that are sent to you for free, which is really cool. I think it's a myth. People think that like if you work in a publishing house, you get every single book for free from that publishing house. And like, that's true for the imprints at which I work, but I can't like go to Riverhead and grab stuff. Like that's not allowed. I would have to pay for those. I get a discount because I'm an employee, but I still have to pay for those. But these you get for free, which is just like, as a book person, so stoked. So, you know, that's super cool. Anything as a PRH employee, and this goes for all employees, not just people who are employee ambassadors, have to, if they post about a Penguin Random House book, tag it #TeamPRH. And that is a way to acknowledge per FTC guidelines that we are biased in our review inherently. And obviously what you write could be the most honest thing in the entire world, the most, you know, objective review. But because you work for a company who could profit from your promotion, you have to say Team PRH. So we get books as part of the program. We are required to participate in at least 2 Penguin Random House promotions throughout the year. Like last year, the one that I did was Read to Sleep. That was one of the promotions about like reading before bed. And I made a post about that, dedicated content to that promotion. So I'll be doing another one for this round and another one further on into the round. So it's a way to boost the promotion, get people excited about that. We are encouraged to show behind the scenes content as employees and kind of just talk about our jobs and talk about the industry. We get a book club, which is super cool, where we all meet. It's a nice, like, especially during a virtual world, like it's a nice way to just meet other people. Like I have become friends with other bookstagrammers who are in this program because, you know, previously I did not know that they worked at Penguin Random House because I'm not in the office to see them, you know? So yeah, it's really cool. In terms of how it affects like my reviewing, which I think was part of what you asked, it can be tricky when coming across a book that you do not care for, but was sent to you. But I think with all reviewing, you don't necessarily have to ascribe positive or negative connotation to what you're talking about. You can say what a book's intentions are. You can talk about what the book's theme is. You can talk about the framing. You can talk about style and not necessarily say like, and it was good or it was amazing. Talking about something as rich can be a big positive because people love like, you know, thicker, denser text. They love text that is a little bit more floral and that you can dig into. But it can also mean like slow and dense and kind of dull and too thick to wade through. The word rich can mean all of that without an attribution one way or the other. And so I think there is a way to just kind of talk about the book as it is that doesn't necessarily hinder your authenticity, but can also portray tone. And like, I think if you follow me and you know what I like and you know what I'm interested in, you might be able to read between the lines.
I love that. And so I wanted to ask you that question because I think you do this so perfectly, because I feel like you approach reviewing with such nuance. And I will admit, like sometimes I finished a book where I was kind of like not sure how I felt on it completely, right? And I would actually go to your Instagram and read a couple of your reviews to see like, how does Matthew approach this? Because he's so good at it. And so all this to say, you're one of my favorite reviewers on both BookTube and Bookstagram. I just think you're phenomenal. And the way you approach books is like inspiring for me and what makes me want to like, I don't know, challenge myself more with my reading and reviewing and really give some, measured thought to books. So that's just me being, a mega fan of Matthew Sciarappa, but I really do.
So incredibly sweet. Thank you.
It's incredible. So I want to know a little bit more about like how, since you joined in 2018, I think you said BookTube, like how is your approach to reviewing changed, or how is it evolving, or like what do you do personally in like approaching a text and how you do all that?
Jeepers.
Big question. I'm sorry.
No. It's a lot. I mean, in terms of like how my reviewing has evolved, I think my vocabulary has expanded. Like, and I think that's what I have liked, because I only entered the Bookstagram sphere in terms of like actually writing reviews recently. And I think that has expanded my vocabulary tenfold, because eventually you start to learn that you're describing writing as beautiful so many times. And like, at the end of the day, that doesn't mean anything. Like,
yeah,
beautiful doesn't mean anything in terms of like, unless you have the context of the person. And ultimately, I think that's what makes Bookstagram and BookTube successful, is the person. We are not professional paid critics. We are people who like to read. And not that the quality lacks because of that, but I do think that a certain amount of implication is added, where somebody can post a Bookstagram photo and just say, oh my God, the writing was so good. I highlighted every line. And like, with the context of that person, that could actually mean something. If somebody wrote that for the fucking New York Times, like, they'd be fired, because that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
That's not like an objective way to approach text. And what makes Bookstagram and BookTube so intriguing is that personal element. But I am curious, as somebody who does reviews or tries to review, if I can accomplish that other thing, if I can remove my personality and actually try to objectively approach the way I describe text or describe work or themes and ideas. And sometimes I lean in personal if I don't really have that much to say about the book. I'll talk about like how I came across it, or, if I liked it or not, that's always there, because I hope that people are interested in me as well as my book reviews. But I am very interested, at least right now, in expanding my vocabulary to be able to talk about things the way that I see them, to be able that if somebody had no context of who I was, they would be able to understand what the book does, or what the book is, about and is like. And I think both are incredibly valid. It's just, one is what I am interested in pursuing, and I think the other is why people have a lot more followers than I do. I think that if you are personality driven, people like that and want to see your content. And I think you can even perhaps sell more copies of books because they want like Jalen's take. They don't necessarily want, an objective take, whatever that would be. This is no critique on your style. That was just,
no, I know what you mean.
And I referenced a name. Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. And that's the thing, like lately, I've been thinking a lot about literary criticism. So I guess formal criticism, and how I can, or if I want to, partake in a little bit more of like an objective style to my reviewing. And so you are one of those people that I look to that does that really good balance, because I feel like when I read a Matthew Sciarappa review, you have that blend of personality, but also I feel like you're truly engaging with the text in a way that offers objectivity as well. And even if you don't love something, like you're able to sell it to a reader that will love it also. And I think that's it can be a hard thing, I find, to do that. So I don't know. I commend you again for your reviewing. And so another thing about your channel that I love is you read a ton of different genres. And that's something that myself, I feel like in the last year or so, I've been reading a lot of literary fiction, contemporary fiction. I don't really read outside of that often. And so that's another thing I love about your channel, is you get a mix of everything. And so I guess I want some personal advice in terms of how do you go about making sure you're reading, or maybe it's not even intentional, really, it's just what you want to read. Like, how do you approach that? And for someone that wants to read more, for example, YA thrillers, like what do you recommend for someone trying to look for something that they would like in that they have a hard time navigating?
Well, I think it just comes down to why you read. I read as a big part to learn. I'm just a very like, I just want to know everything and I never will. And that's really frustrating. And it sounds like a cliche, but it's true. Like, I want to know what is being written in YA right now. I want to know what middle grade writers are up to. I want to know about bizarre niche bouts of nonfiction. I love poetry. That's a pretty new love. I think I've definitely tried to make poetry like part of my brand recently and very much my personality. But it's a very new thing in my life. Only in the past year have I really like dug into poetry as much as I have. And I think there's just a joy that I find in fixating that happens. In terms of like, if you are interested in expanding, you know, I think it's just a matter of like, what are you excited about? Like, what are you interested in?
Right.
You know, if do you want to read some gay stuff? There's so much gay YA. Like, do you want to read stuff about like outer space? Like, it's there. Like, I think, you know, there is such a bountiful selection to choose from. But maybe, especially if you're looking to break across age group in terms of writing, you know, maybe that's the difference. You know that you like reading about this thing, but maybe you could read it from a teen's perspective. Maybe you could read it from a kid's perspective, and like that's the difference. Maybe you like reading if you like themes of resilience and endurance. You know, I think you can find that in Marilyn Robinson's Home as much as you can find that in the Dyachenko's Vita Nostra. That is why I love those books. Themes of resilience are like my favorite to read about. And those are wildly different texts into very different genres. So I think it's just a matter of like, find what you like and then seek it out elsewhere. Like, you know, you like the thing, like if you like reading about, I know like one of the things that you specifically like reading about are like depressed women, like chaotic women. You know, like you can find books about messy teens. Like you can find some really messy, chaotic, depressed kids in YA.
Mm-hmm.
You can find it. You can find a really good memoir about a person in real life who is like that. You can read poetry from that perspective. It's out there. And I think that upon reading it in different places, you might be able to find what else you like about it or something else in that drives you in a different direction. So that would be kind of my advice for expansion is like, stick with what you like, but just find it somewhere else.
Definitely. I mean, do you have some sort of like intentionality with what you pick up next, or are you mostly a mood reader?
A lot of what I pick up is driven by zeitgeist. It's what is popular. I'm curious about what is popular in science fiction, what is popular in lit fic. That definitely influences a lot. I would also say marketing. I'm, you know, perhaps because it's what I work in, but like if I see a well-marketed book or a cleverly marketed book, I will snatch that up so quickly, which is a very like meta way to pick up something. You know, I might have no idea what it is, but because I see like a really cool campaign, I want it. I'm a cover buyer for sure. Like that's a big thing. I also pick up things that are referenced in other things very easily. Like I read Brandy Carlisle's memoir recently, Obsessed. She's my God and Savior. In that she mentions the Ragamuffin Gospel, which is like this weird Christian ex-Franciscan memoir Bible study thing. I bought a copy just because like I thought, hey, I want to read that. That sounds cool. Brandy Carlisle likes it. So I guess that is the epitome of a mood reader. It's just following the trend. But I think those are all very different perspectives of mood. I don't necessarily intentionally think, oh, I need to pick up nonfiction right now, or oh, I need to read a poetry book. It's been a while. That doesn't quite navigate me.
Gotcha. Not related to this, but do you have any favorite bookstores in New York that you would recommend to like someone that's visiting to check out? Because I haven't been to New York since I was a teenager and I want to go back, and there's so many cool bookstores that I've seen on Bookstagram. So do you have any thoughts on that, recommendations?
Absolutely. So many. I think if I had to choose like a favorite bookstore in all of New York, probably Book Culture is my fave. I think that they have a fantastic used section with like really good pricing, like appropriate pricing. And they also have a nice curation of translated fiction, which is something that I generally like. They have a nice curation of like bookstore or bookseller favorites. I like the vibe. They also sell academic texts. So if you're looking for like real niche stuff or like something bizarre that you read in college that you just remember the title of and are kind of interested in picking up it again, they might have it. So really a big fan. They also are very fun on social media. Book Culture. If you're in Brooklyn, I go to Greenlight. That's my local. I love Greenlight. I like, again, the vibe. I like the set out. They have a fantastic poetry section. It's like 2 stacks wide, which is more than most bookstores, I feel. They have a lovely table for just indie press. I find a lot of chapbooks there too, which you can't really find in like more mainstream bookstores. If you're going to New York, like you have to go to the Strand. I feel like you're like legally obligated, or else like you're opposed. Like, I don't know, like it's like
Yeah.
you kind of have to. And the Strand is lovely. I think, you know, the Strand 5 years ago is not the Strand today. And that's kind of I don't want to be like a curmudgeon, but I do kind of feel that. Like it is very hard to find a cheap book there anymore. They've pretty much just given up on that part of the Strand, but it's, you know, it's a New York staple. There are so many, I could keep going. McNally Jackson is super cool. There are a couple of different locations, and they arrange their fiction by region. So you can find just like East Asian literature and scour their shelves. You can
Very
find,
cool.
you know, European, very different regions of Europe literature, and like just look at those, which I really think is a fun way, especially if you're looking to read more globally.
Nice. Yeah, these bookstores you're naming, they're all doing, I mean, throughout COVID, they were doing a lot of like author events, and I've been tuned into a lot of them. So it's nice hearing those names again, because I really want to, you know, visit more bookstores. And so I'll definitely add those to my list. So one thing that I wanted to get your insight on was, I don't know too much about it, but you were involved in drama before. You have a background in it. So can you tell us about that? And does that inform, so I know you love the book, The Performance, which my friend CJ, she just read and also loved based on your recommendation. So it's on my TBR. So I don't know if you can talk about drama in books and any kind of ties you find there.
Sure. Yeah, I went to theater school. I went to NYU Tisch to study drama. I studied at the Stella Adler Studio of Acting, wanted to be an actor, did it for a little bit, and then wanted a paycheck instead. So I found a job. I very much stumbled into publishing, which I think is very funny. I know people like would kill for a publishing job, and often I feel very guilty because like I knew a guy and he recommended me, and I needed a job. It stuck and I love it. So I'm very grateful. But, you know, anyway, in terms of like how drama or theater has influenced my book life or my reading life, definitely the way that I approach texts is influenced by that. Like the way that I read scripts and the way that I read books are very similar in terms of what I'm looking for or how I view it, or thinking about the psychology of characters. I think that shows up. I think there's a lot of similarity in script texts and poetry. And I think that that's why I've really enjoyed poetry as much as I have, because there's a lot of decoding that you can do, because a play text has everything removed. There is no psychological context for why things are happening. It is an actor's job to put that in there. It's what actors do. It's very exciting and it's very fun. And if you're somebody like me who's super nerdy and loves like the dramaturgy of it all, you're going to want to unpack it, which is why a book like The Performance by Claire Thomas is probably going to be my favorite book of the year. One, I'm a huge Beckett fan, and like the whole book takes place during a performance of Beckett's Happy Days, and like every nerdish pore in my body is just like secreting nerd joy. Super gross. So sorry I just said that. But I don't really want to spoil what the book does, but I think that it's very interesting that in the course of 2 acts and an intermission, it is one of the most playful books that I have read, pun intended, in terms of how it approaches characters, how it approaches theater, and how it approaches like space. And I think all of those are inherently theater and all of those are inherently fiction. And it's just a matter of like what that book does to like connect the dots. I think it is so impressive.
Nice. Yeah, I know, like that's a really cool point that you make about poetry and plays or drama in terms of like the abstraction there. I mean, I know one book that I talked to you about is Sarah Kane and her collection of plays, which is the only collection of plays I've read since maybe middle school or high school when I read Shakespeare. And I really loved the experience of it. It was very disorienting and it was challenging for me, especially with one play in particular called Crave was so hard for me to kind of like parse through, but I loved the challenge of it and just that distinction of it being on paper versus actually seeing a performance and what the nuance and depth there that can be brought out by actors and just seeing it visually. I don't know if you have any other like play recommendations that I should check out based on that.
To go from nothing to Sarah Kane is,
and I don't know why I did that, but
thinking of just like 4.48 Psychosis as a piece of theater alone is kind of a bizarre thing. There have been productions throughout the years that have been just one actor on stage reading it, There have been other performances of like full cast ensembles and like full dance theater. And it's just a matter of like how that is interpreted. And I think that's what Sarah Kane probably like, very fun, very exciting, hard to approach. And like, I think you have to have a very directorial brain when dealing with that kind of text. You're not going to get much like plot and theme in the way that like other plays can offer. So super cool that you read that collection. I mean, she's brilliant and died too young. It's very sad. But in terms of like plays that are good for reading, I'm not sure. I think there are a lot of cool like modern plays that are kind of fun. Maybe I could give you like a list to put in your description box, because off the top of my head, I don't really know that many, but like, you know, I don't want to discredit, read some Shakespeare. Like, it's pretty great. Read Richard II, some of the best texts you will ever come across in your entire fucking life. There's validity to that. Some translations of Ibsen are killer. Chekhov, you want to think about theme and, you know, structure, read some Chekhov. Like, you know, I think like there's a lot in terms of like 101 that is incredibly valuable. I also think that there's an interesting thing, at least with like my generation of theater students, where we kind of grew up on like Kenneth Lonergan and very like early 2000s plays, which are their own style. You know, you get these like very realistic characters with like incredibly verbose thought processes and super enriched vocabularies, and it doesn't make sense. It's like the Gilmore Girls effect. Like, how are these people as smart as they are while being as like plain as they are, you know, for lack of better verbiage. So I think like that kind of, I don't know, you get really niche with plays is all I'm trying to say. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything contemporary because my brain is not wired in that way anymore, but I will give you some to link below.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Definitely. In terms of like goal setting for you in your reading, do you do that? So how many books do you read like a year, or is that a goal for you or not? Number.
It changes by year. Currently I'm at like 130, I think. And a lot of that's just because like it's my job and I need to, and I read a lot of manuscripts and like, I count those because it makes me feel good. And I also read a lot of poetry and I read a lot of manga and graphic novels. And like, I think therefore my number tends to be higher by the end of the year. I'll probably hit like 180, possibly 200, depending on how zealous I get.
Very cool. Yeah, that's something I've been trying to think about like every year in terms of like what goals do I want to set for my reading that are beneficial for me personally, or should I just kind of, you know, go with the flow? And also, I guess aside from reading, like what are your favorite hobbies? Like what do you do outside of, you know, being in the book world?
It's you know, I feel like I'm a very boring person because books really are it. I do other things. Big fan of anime, watch a lot of anime. I do still enjoy theater. You know, Broadway is back. We're all very excited. But like, books are the thing. I don't really listen to podcasts. I'd rather be listening to an audiobook. I don't watch that many movies. I'm usually reading. And I think that's another reason why I consume as many books as quickly as I do, is like, that's just the thing that I do. But like, I play video games. I'm a normal person. I don't know. I listen to music. I watch a lot of YouTube. You know, I'm a
That's
general
me.
media person. Yeah.
Okay, so what is your reading setup? I'm curious, like what is your perfect, you have a night to read, like what is the set the tone, set the mood?
Okay, so real talk, my favorite reading setup is being on the subway.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
that is when I get the most reading done and the most like intensive reading done. I really miss having a commute. I've been working from home since, you know, everything happened, so I really miss having a commute for that reason. That's like 45 minutes to myself to read. In terms of like perfect reading setup, like at home, we would go to my childhood home where there is a deck and some trees and very quiet. I would probably have some sort of beverage of the alcohol variety in my hand. And I would be like, my father is also a big reader and he sits outside, and often we'll like sit outside together and read in silence. And like that company without the pressure of conversation, I find so lovely. So probably like sitting outside on a deck with company, everyone's reading. It's a nice quiet time.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know too many people IRL that read, so I don't get that really personally, but that does sound amazing. And I guess I haven't been involving booze as much like in these podcast discussions, but I guess I have to ask you, so on my channel I usually have like a beer or a glass of wine of some sort, but are you a beer person at all? Like what are your alcoholic drinks, your go-tos?
I'm not a beer person.
Okay.
I find them to be bloaty, and I just don't like that feeling.
They are bloaty.
I will.
It's unfortunate.
I am a no alcohol is good for you, or all that stuff. If I do drink beer, it's going to be darker, and it'll probably have some sort of like sweet thing to it, something with like maple, or even just like a Guinness is fine by me.
Yeah.
I like tequila. I
Nice.
will drink tequila straight. I will like not. I mean, I love a cocktail. I'm a homosexual. I will love a cocktail. I will drink any cocktail. But like tequila is like probably the booze that I know most about, that I can make recommendations with. I know what to order. I know what I like. I think that's probably the thing for me.
Nice. Do you have a recommendation for tequila? Because I feel like I'm not well versed. So I mostly drink beer and wine, but I do love tequila. Do you have any recommendations to pick up?
Well, it depends on like what you want to do. Like, do you
Yeah.
want to like drink something nice, or do you want to take a shot, or do you want to make a cocktail?
What's
think
like
if you're looking for like a middle of the road, like
maybe like a nice sipper. Like if you could, I don't know.
I think you could just do like a Don Julio Reposado, and like that's just a lovely thing to drink. It's gonna be smooth and lovely. My go-to is just like Herradura. It's like a silver hair, like it's just
nice.
It's well priced. It's nice. It's yummy. I don't know.
Okay, perfect. Good to know.
But like, I think you can do, expense is a thing. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Costco like does have really nice tequila. Like it's like not bad.
That's where I get most of my booze is Costco. So nice.
In terms of like a nice sipper, like I would, if I'm looking for something like that I'm just consuming and want to like savor, I would go a Reposado. I would go a little bit more expensive. That's what I would do. My go-tos are silvers and cheaper because money.
Yeah, money is a thing for sure. I want to know, are you from New York, or did you move there at some point in your life?
I moved here for college. I'm originally from Pittsburgh.
Oh, nice. I did not know that. How are you finding New York generally? I am fascinated by New York. I've never lived there in my life, but I could definitely see myself at some point, but I don't know.
I mean, I'm coming up on almost 10 years, which is interesting. I think that living in New York means having constant, dull anxiety. And I feel like a lot of people just generally have that. It's a generational thing for sure. But in terms of like, it's the city that never sleeps, it truly doesn't. Like, you don't really get a moment of breath or to relax. And at my lowest lows living here, I think the one thing that has made it better is me just leaving for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And if that can just be as small as like taking the ferry somewhere, like just like leaving the city or going home for a week, like that's really lovely to see my folks or just see some nature. But for all of its loveliness, the immediacy, the pace, which is the thing I love most, everyone's just so fast here. You have to constantly just like never feel at rest. I don't know anybody in New York who does feel at rest. I would be very curious as to what makes them feel that way living in this place.
Yeah. Do you see yourself being there long term, or?
It's so interesting, right? Because I came here for theater. Where else do you do it other than New York? Quickly moved to publishing. Where else do you do that other than New York? But then everything's remote now and everything's kind of up in the air. And like, if I lived somewhere else, I would be making so much more money for not having to pay such large rent. Currently, yes, I will be here. I don't foresee myself moving anytime soon, but like the option is available and that's incredibly new to me. So who knows?
Gotcha. Cool. I've been talking to my parents about maybe making a trip out east. So if I'm ever in New York, of course, I would love to meet you in person. It'll be cool. It'll be fun times. I guess so. I have two questions for you before we go. So what's currently on your like immediate TBR, and what are you currently reading? Those are my two questions.
Currently, I actually have them right here.
Oh, perfect.
Currently reading Strange Heart Beating by Eli Goldstone. This came out not a while. I feel like this was like not a booktube darling, but it was quite popular in the UK sphere of booktube a while ago. And I snagged a copy recently because this cover is just killer. Enjoying it so far. I am reading The Easy Life in Hamusari. This is by Shion Miura and translated by Juliet Winters Carpenter. This was sent to me, thank you. But Shion Miura wrote The Great Passage, which is a lovely book about the creation of a dictionary. I was obsessed with it when I first read it. So I'm currently reading this new one, which I like. On my immediate TBR, I have the new Nina LaCour that's coming out, Yerba Buena. So excited.
That's her first adult book, right?
Yeah, which is really exciting.
Very cool.
And I've loved her YA very much. My Darling from the Lions by Rachel Long. This is coming out, I mean, we're filming this on Sunday. It's coming out on Tuesday. Poetry. This has been out in the UK, but is finally hitting the States. And then the Bessie Smith bio that's coming out from Vintage. So this is a hashtag Team Fire RH, Penguin Random House Company. But this is by Jackie Kay, and she is an incredible poet. And that's why I'm reading this. Very excited.
Nice. It's always cool to find people that also read many books at one time. Sometimes it feels, do you ever feel chaos when reading many books, or does it kind of feel normal to you? I feel both sometimes. I'm like, I'm reading too much, but I like it. I don't know.
I'm reading everything all at once. I can't. One, to keep my attention. Two, because like I also get a lot of curveballs. Like, hey Matthew, can you read this manuscript tonight? And I'll have to read that manuscript. And like reading multiple things at once allows me like a certain amount of flexibility because I don't feel guilty abandoning a text. So yeah, no, I don't know what a life is only reading one book. Yeah.
Do you cap it at a certain number ever, or do you just kind of let it go as you want?
I mean, I think it caps it for itself. Like eventually I'll probably just forget that I'm reading something, or like DNF it because I'm not paying as much attention to it.
Yeah. Oh, I have to ask you now. What is your stance on DNFing? Do you DNF a lot? I can't remember if you made a video on this or not.
I don't remember if I have, and if I have, it might be long since privated. I believe in DNFing.
Yeah.
In terms of like, if you're not enjoying, like again, it all depends on why you read. But if you're not enjoying something, life's too short, and there are so many books. I do believe on finishing books for the sake of, critical analysis and or hate reading. Go for it. Go off. It's again, why do you read? Why do you want to read? I think people who take pride in their DNFs are a little bit silly. Like, you didn't finish. Go off, sis. Like, I don't know. Like, what does that give you?
Yeah.
And like people who commentate on books that they have not finished, I think that there needs to be a certain amount of scope in acknowledging you did not finish the book. Like,
definitely.
It's saying like, I DNF'd it, therefore this book is terrible. And I'm like, well, that's questionable. Like, I doubt you.
Yeah.
Again, this is what makes BookTube and Bookstagram the thing that it is, because like if somebody does that and they are known for doing that, people might know what that means. But like, imagine if somebody from the New York Times DNF'd a book. Like, that's not going to happen. It just doesn't happen. Yeah.
I tend to feel like a sense of guilt sometimes when I'm DNFing, because I think, going back to like the critical analysis of it all, like sometimes I have this sense of like FOMO of like, what if the ending is like, what if it really brings it all together? And I just set it aside because I wasn't vibing at the moment. And it also kind of plays with my mood reading. But I'm always curious to know what their stance is on that.
I mean, for me, it's 9 times out of 10, it's not gonna all come together. Like, it's usually not. Like, so I think, I don't know. I think DNFing's fine. I think that the only thing that would keep me reading something that I would want to DNF is like guilt because I paid for it, or like it's my best friend's book, or like, like it's, something like that.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the channel and on the podcast. I've been talking to you about collaborating for a while now, so I'm excited we finally got to do it. And I've been very excited for the opportunity to fangirl over you, because I'm a huge fan. I think you're such an amazing content creator, reviewer. You're so kind. I really, if you don't follow Matthew, please go do it. I'll have all the stuff linked below, of course. But please go do it. And thank you so much for coming on. Oh, I have to say, so when I forget how many or when this was, but you gave me a shout out on your channel. I think it was like a year ago or something, when I'm still small, but like very small. And it was just, I was so shocked because, again, I watched you before joining BookTube, and it was so nice. I wanted to thank you on here as well for doing that. It's just so kind. I don't know. Long story short, you're awesome.
You're awesome. No, thank you. No, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your lovely content that I get to enjoy. I very much appreciate it all.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. I don't know who's going to be on, but it'll be fun as always. But thanks.